Hey y'all. This week I'm going to be talking about how I got started as a conservation photographer. Every time I do an art show or a workshop, I'm always asked that question, did I get started taking pictures for a living? So this week I'm focusing all on what got me started.
This is Experience Wildlife. I've spent my entire life traveling around the world to the most exotic places on Earth, looking for wildlife to photograph and places to discover. Join me as I travel around the world and in my own backyard, supporting conservation efforts to save our world's most endangered creatures, and tell the stories of the wildlife that cannot speak for themselves. I'm Jennifer Leigh Warner, and I am Experience Wildlife. I always knew I wanted to be a wildlife photographer, ever since I was a little girl watching National Geographic and being inspired by some of the great wildlife photographers of our time. I also gained my inspiration for being a wildlife photographer from my parents, who enjoyed traveling and would take me to exotic and amazing places when I was young. I studied communications and photography at Washington State University. After I graduated, I got a job working at an art gallery for a famous wildlife photographer, Tom Mengelson. In 2006, I attended my very first photography workshop that was taught by Tom in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. This workshop, the Photography at the Summit, was where I learned how to take pictures of wildlife and landscapes. In 2006, I also met my husband, Derek, and together we started Experience Wildlife. I spent those first few years developing a portfolio by photographing locally as well as taking some trips around the world. As I continued to grow my portfolio, I started selling my work in art festivals and galleries. I started getting my work published in magazines and books and started doing some public speaking and workshops as well. As I began to gain notoriety from my work, I continued to travel as much as possible, trying to gain as much experience as I could. Over the years, I really enjoyed traveling, teaching, and selling my art, but I knew I wanted to do more with my work. So I started teaming up with conservation organizations that had a shared set of values with me. Organizations like the Cheetah Conservation Fund, North American Nature Photographers Association, as well as a few others. I also started conservation projects that were on topics that were important to me, mostly focusing on human-wildlife coexistence and wildlife photography ethics. As part of my continued efforts to support conservation with my photography, I've launched a new website. ExperienceWildlife.com is a website that directly supports conservation nonprofits through the sales of my photography as well as workshops. You'll see that on the site, I have featured nonprofits, this one being the Cheetah Conservation Fund, as well as other organizations that I will be supporting in the near future. My photography can be purchased as fine art photographs, both framed, metal, or as print only. And through these sales of limited editions, 50% of all the proceeds will go towards helping support nonprofit organizations and their conservation fieldwork. Within the site, you'll see specific information about each of the nonprofits, the challenges that these animals are facing, and shows photography that directly has supported these organizations. Within the site, you'll also be able to make a direct donation to that nonprofit. Within Experience Wildlife, I have raised thousands of dollars for these nonprofit organizations. I've donated dozens of images for them to use for auctions in order to raise money. And I've led dozens of workshops that will directly take you into the field and work with these nonprofits yourself, learning how to take your own storytelling imagery. This site also shows events in which I participate in, everything from workshops to public speaking, public art shows, as well as free online community. Each of these events are available to the public to see, and I invite you to join me as I travel around the world supporting these nonprofit organizations and helping teach other photographers how they too can use their images to support wildlife.
Well, that's pretty much my entire story, so I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about me and how I got started as a conservation photographer. I'm still a work in progress, but hopefully you'll continue to join me as I take you along with me on my many adventures and tell you about some of my past ones as well. Next week, we're going to be talking a little bit more about my hometown of Austin, Texas. So join in, and I'll see you next week. Bye.